I swiped right, and it almost cost me my life. Before we start, pause the video and comment below. Where are you watching from? And what time is it on your clock right now? I read every single comment. If you're new here, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss a story. If you're already part of the Nightmare Index family, smash that like button. It helps more people find these stories than you'd ever believe. Now turn off the lights if you haven't already. Tonight, I've got 3 true stories from people who learned the hard way that the person on the other side of that screen might not be who they claim to be. Let's begin. He already knew my name before I could introduce myself. This happened during the fall, right after I'd gotten out of a relationship that lasted way longer than it should have. My buddy Terrence had been pushing me to get back out there, telling me I needed to stop moping around my apartment and actually meet someone new. So I did what every other single late 20s does. I downloaded a dating app. I went with one of the more relationship-focused ones, figuring I'd have better luck finding someone serious than on the apps that were basically just for hookups. Spent about an hour setting up my profile, picking the right photos, writing a bio that made me sound interesting but not desperate. You know the drill. For the first couple weeks, nothing really clicked. A few matches here and there, some small talk that fizzled out, a couple people who seemed nice but lived too far away to make it practical. Standard online dating experience, really. And I was starting to think Terrence had set me up for disappointment. Then I matched with Jarek. His profile was different. Most guys in my area had photos of themselves at the gym or holding a fish they'd caught. Jarek had pictures from what looked like indie art galleries, coffee shops with exposed brick walls, hiking trails I actually recognized from my own state. His bio mentioned that he was a freelance graphic designer who'd recently moved to the area from the Midwest and was looking to meet new people. Something about him felt genuine in a way that most profiles didn't. We started chatting, and right away, the conversation flowed easier than anything I'd experienced on the app. He was witty, asked thoughtful questions, and actually seemed interested in my answers. When I mentioned I worked in IT security, he didn't glaze over like most people do. He asked specific questions about what kind of work I did, whether I enjoyed it, what got me into the field. After about a week of solid texting, Jarek asked if I wanted to meet up in person. He suggested this Italian restaurant downtown that I'd been meaning to try for months, said he'd read good reviews, and thought it might be the perfect first date spot. I agreed without hesitation. The night of the date, I got to the restaurant about 10 minutes early. Old habit from my dad. If you're not early, you're late. I found a booth near the back, ordered some water, and tried to calm my nerves. First dates always made me anxious, even when I felt confident about the person. Jarek walked in right on time. He looked exactly like his photos, which was a relief in itself. Tall, dark hair swept back, wearing a fitted black jacket over a gray Henley. He spotted me immediately and smiled as he made his way over. "You must be Devin," he said, sliding into the seat across from me. "That's me." "You're Jarek?" "Guilty." He shrugged off his jacket and draped it over the booth. "I have to say, you look even better in person. Those photos really don't do you justice." I felt my face get warm. "Thanks. You're not so bad yourself." The first hour of the date went perfectly. We ordered appetizers, split a bottle of wine, talked about everything from favorite movies to travel goals. Jarek had this way of making eye contact that felt intense, but not uncomfortable, like he was genuinely hanging on every word I said. It wasn't until we were halfway through our entrees that things started to feel off. "So," Jarek said, a twirling pasta around his fork. "How's Winston doing these days?" I paused mid-bite. "Winston?" "Your dog, the golden retriever. You mentioned you had one, right?" I hadn't mentioned Winston. I was certain of it. My profile had no pet information. I'd specifically left that out because I'd read somewhere that it was better to keep some things for in-person conversation. Yeah, I have a golden retriever named Winston, I said slowly. But I don't think I told you about him. Jarek's smile didn't waver. Oh, you must have. Maybe in one of our earlier chats. I have a pretty good memory for details. I didn't push it. Maybe I'd mentioned Winston at some point and just forgot. The wine was making my memory a little fuzzy anyway. But looking back, well, I should have trusted that first knot of unease in my stomach, because it was only going to get worse. We finished our entrees, and Jarek insisted on ordering dessert. He was charming, attentive, laughing at all my jokes in a way that felt genuine. By the time the tiramisu arrived, I'd almost forgotten about the Winston comment entirely. You know, Jarek said, picking up his spoon, this place kind of reminds me of that restaurant your parents used to take you to when you were a kid. What was it called? Mama Lucia's. On 4th Street? The words hit me like ice water. Mama Lucia's was a tiny Italian restaurant in the town where I grew up, 3 hours away from where I lived now. It closed down when I was 12. My parents used to take me there every Sunday after church. It was a core childhood memory, one I'd never shared with anyone I'd dated, let alone someone I'd known for a week through an app. How do you know about Mama Lucia's? I asked. My voice came out steadier than I felt. Jarek tilted his head slightly. You mentioned it. When we were talking about Italian food, don't you remember? No, I didn't mention it. Devin, I didn't mention it, Jarek. I set down my fork. My appetite was completely gone. That restaurant closed before I even started high school. I haven't talked about it in years. For just a moment, something flickered in Jarek's expression. It was brief, less than a second, but I caught it. A flash of something cold behind his eyes, like a mask slipping before being quickly adjusted. Then he laughed. It sounded completely natural. You know what? You're right. I'm sorry. I think I might be mixing you up with someone else. I was chatting with a few people on the app before we matched. My bad. I wanted to believe him. Part of me was desperate to believe him, because the alternative was too strange to fully process. What kind of person knows about a restaurant you went to as a child? It's fine, I said, though it wasn't. Honest mistake. We finished dessert in relative silence. Jarek tried to restart the conversation a few times, but I gave one-word answers. I could feel him studying me, recalibrating. When the check came, Jarek insisted on paying. I let him. I just wanted to get out of there. I had a really great time tonight, he said as we walked toward the parking lot. We should do this again soon. Maybe I could cook for you. I make a killer risotto. Yeah, maybe, I said, and already planning to ghost him the moment I got home. We stopped near my car. Jarek leaned against the hood of his own vehicle, a silver sedan parked a few spaces away, and looked at me with that same intense focus. Drive safe, he said. That stretch of highway between here and Willow Creek can be tricky at night, especially past the old water tower. I went completely still. Willow Creek was my neighborhood. The old water tower was a landmark about a mile from my apartment complex, visible from the highway, but not something you'd know about unless you'd actually driven that route before. How do you know where I live? Jarek's smile didn't change. Lucky guess. That's not a guess. That's my exact route home. He pushed off from his car and took a step toward me. Just one step, but it was enough to make me take 2 steps back. So, Devin, he said softly, we've been talking for a week. You probably mentioned landmarks. It's not that weird. I never told you my address. I never told you what neighborhood I live in. I didn't even give you my last name. Jarek's expression finally changed. The pleasant, charming mask fell away entirely, and what was left underneath was blank. empty, like a screen that had been turned off. "You're overthinking this," he said. His voice was flat now. "People share more than they realize online. I barely have a social media presence. My Instagram is private. My Facebook hasn't been updated in years. There are other ways." Those 4 words hung in the cold air between us. "What does that mean?" Jarek didn't answer. He just watched me, the way you'd watch an animal that might bolt at any second. And I pulled out my phone and opened the dating app. My hands were shaking as I navigated to Jarek's profile and clicked on the info section. I'd never checked it closely before, but now I noticed something I'd missed. His account had been created just 2 weeks ago, right around the same time I created mine. "When did you start using this app?" I asked. "A while ago." "Your profile says 2 weeks. Another silence. This one stretched long enough to make my skin crawl. "I deleted my old account and made a new one," Jarek said finally. "Fresh start." "Right." I stepped back until I felt my car door behind me. "I'm going to go now." "You're overreacting." "Probably." I fumbled with my keys. "But I'm still going." I got in my car and locked the doors immediately. Jarek didn't move. He just stood there in the middle of the parking lot, watching me back out of my space. When I drove past him, he raised one hand in a slow wave. I didn't wave back. The drive home took 18 minutes. I checked my rearview mirror the entire time, but I never saw silver headlights following me. When I got to my apartment, I parked in the underground garage, walked to the elevator, and took it straight up to my floor. My hands were still trembling when I let myself inside. The first thing I did was lock the deadbolt. Then the chain. Then I pulled the curtains closed on every window. I sat on my couch in the dark, trying to calm down. I was probably being paranoid. People did say more than they realized in casual conversation. Maybe I had mentioned Winston, or the restaurant, or something about my commute. Maybe I was making connections that weren't there, but I couldn't shake the feeling. I opened my laptop and did something I should have done before ever agreeing to meet Jarek in person. I reverse image searched his profile photos. Nothing came up. That wasn't necessarily suspicious. Not everyone has their photos floating around the internet. But then I searched his name. Jarek isn't a common name, and he'd said he was a freelance graphic designer. There should have been something. A portfolio, a LinkedIn, even old forum posts. Nothing. Absolutely nothing. It was like Jarek didn't exist before he matched with me. I was about to close my laptop when my phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. That security camera in the parking lot was a nice touch, but those cameras haven't worked in months. I know. I checked last week. My blood turned to ice. Another text came through. "By the way, you left your kitchen window unlocked. Second one from the left. I noticed it on Tuesday when I was walking past your building." I didn't respond. I didn't move. I just sat there, staring at my phone, reading those words over and over. Then I looked up at my kitchen window, the second one from the left. The curtain was slightly parted, just an inch or two. Enough to see out. Enough to see in. I forced myself to get up and walk to the window. My legs felt like they belonged to someone else. When I reached the curtain, I yanked it open. The window was unlocked, just like he said. I locked it with shaking hands, then checked every other window in my apartment. When I was done, I sat back down and called the non-emergency police line. I told them everything. The date, the comments, the texts. The officer who took my call was sympathetic but honest. There wasn't much they could do. No direct threat had been made. No crime had been committed. The best they could offer was to have a patrol car drive past my building more frequently for the next few days. I didn't sleep that night. The next morning, I changed my phone number, deleted my dating profile, installed new locks on my door, and cameras outside my windows. I told my landlord what had happened, and he agreed to have the building's security footage backed up to an external server going forward. For weeks after, I felt watched. Every time I left my apartment, I scanned the parking lot for silver sedans. Every time my phone buzzed with an unknown number, my heart rate spiked. I started varying my route to work, parking in different spots, and shopping at grocery stores in other neighborhoods. Slowly, gradually, the paranoia faded. Jarek never texted again. I never saw him lurking outside my building. Eventually, I let myself believe that whoever he was, he'd moved on to someone else. She was already here without me knowing. I'm not the kind of person who does a lot of first dates. I'm pretty introverted, and the whole song and dance of meeting someone new has always stressed me out more than it excites me. I've been single for almost 2 years now, and my therapist kept telling me I needed to put myself out there. So I downloaded a dating app and decided to give it an honest try. My name's Theo, and I'm 31. I work from home as a freelance copywriter, which means I spend most of my time in my small townhouse on the outskirts of a suburb that doesn't really have a downtown. It's quiet. Boring, even. The kind of place where nothing really happens. After a few weeks on the app, I matched with a woman named Ilara. She was striking. Dark, curly hair, bright eyes, the kind of smile that looked genuine even in photos. Her profile said she worked in veterinary medicine and loved hiking, bad horror movies, and anyone who can actually hold a conversation. I figured I could at least manage that last one. We texted for about 2 weeks before she suggested we meet up. I was hesitant at first, my usual anxiety kicking in. But she was patient about it. Said we could take things as slow as I needed. Eventually, we settled on dinner at a Thai place about 20 minutes from my house. Neutral ground, a public setting, all the smart first date safety stuff I'd read about online. But then Ilara threw a curveball. Actually, she texted the morning of, "I'm having car trouble. My mechanic can't look at it until tomorrow. Is there any chance you could pick me up?" I stared at the message for a long time. It wasn't an unreasonable request. People have car problems all the time. But something about it felt off. We'd never met in person, and now she wanted me to drive to her place. Or worse, have her come to mine. Before I could respond, she sent a follow-up. "Or if you want, I could just Uber to your place, and you could drive us from there. I promise I'm not a serial killer bull." I laughed despite myself. It was a reasonable compromise. She'd come to me, we'd leave together, and I'd have complete control over the transportation. If something felt weird, I could just not let her in. "Sure," I texted back. "I'll send you my address." She was supposed to arrive at 6. By 5:30, I'd cleaned my living room twice, changed my shirt 3 times, and checked my reflection in every mirror I owned. First date nerves in full effect. I turned on some music, something chill and ambient, and tried to convince myself that everything was going to be fine. At 5:45, my phone buzzed. "On my way. Uber says about 15 minutes. I typed back, "Sounds good. Just text when you're close." For the next several minutes, I wandered around my townhouse without purpose. Straightened a picture frame, fluffed a throw pillow, wondered for the 100th time why I'd agreed to this. At 5:58, my phone buzzed again. Stuck in traffic near the highway. Might be like 5 more minutes. "I'm sorry." "No problem," I started to type, but then I paused. The app we'd matched on had a feature I'd never used before, a live location sharing option. Some people enabled it for safety reasons, letting matches see where they were during a meetup. I'd never asked Ilara to turn it on, but I remembered her mentioning she always kept it active because it made her feel safer. On a whim, I opened the app and navigated to our chat. Sure enough, there was a little View Location button at the top of the screen. I tapped it. The map loaded slowly on my phone's spotty Wi-Fi. I waited, watching the blue circle spin as it tried to pinpoint Ilara's location. If she was stuck on the highway, the dot should be somewhere near the interstate, maybe at one of the big intersections where traffic always backed up. The map finished loading. The dot wasn't on the highway. It was on my street. In fact, according to the app, Ilara wasn't just on my street. She was already on my property. Somewhere in the darkness behind my house, I felt my whole body go cold. I refreshed the screen. Maybe it was a glitch. GPS could be weird sometimes, especially in areas with limited cell coverage. The dot would probably jump to the right location any second now. It didn't move. According to the app, Ilara was in my backyard, not approaching, not moving toward the front door, just there, stationary, 10 feet from my back porch. I looked up from my phone and stared at the sliding glass door that led to my small patio area. The blinds were down, but not closed. I could see fragments of the backyard through the horizontal slats. The sky had gone from orange to purple, and my yard was filled with deep shadows. I didn't see anyone out there, but the dot said she was there. My phone buzzed. Another text from Ilara. "Ugh, this traffic is the worst. Promise I'll be there soon. Hope you're not getting impatient, Lo." I read the text 3 times. She said she was stuck in traffic. The app said she was in my backyard. One of those things was a lie. I set my phone down on the coffee table and stood up slowly. My heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my temples. Every instinct I had was screaming at me that something was deeply, terrifyingly wrong. I walked toward the sliding glass door. Every step felt like it took forever. My socks whispered against the carpet. The ambient music I'd put on earlier suddenly sounded too loud, too intrusive. I reached out and adjusted the blinds, untilting them just enough to see more of the backyard. The patio was empty. The 2 lawn chairs I kept out there were exactly where I'd left them. The small grill was covered. The fence that separated my property from my neighbors looked undisturbed. But the far corner of my yard, the part near the detached garage, was completely swallowed in shadow. I couldn't see anything there. I pulled out my phone again and checked the app. The dot hadn't moved. If anything, it looked like it had gotten slightly closer. "This is crazy," I muttered to myself. "It's just a glitch." But I didn't believe it. I backed away from the sliding door and walked toward my front window instead. If Ilara's Uber had just pulled up, I'd see it on the street. That would explain everything. GPS lag, a minor error, technology being technology. I looked outside. The street was empty. No cars, no Uber, no one. Another text. "Okay, I think we're finally moving. Maybe 3 more minutes. You there?" I didn't respond. Instead, I walked to my front door and made sure the deadbolt was engaged. Then the chain. Then I grabbed the baseball bat I kept in my front closet, a leftover from college that I'd never gotten rid of. I went back to the app. The dot was still there, still in my backyard, still motionless. And then, as I watched, it started to move. Not away from my house, not toward the street, toward my back door. I backed away from the living room until my shoulders hit the wall. My grip on the baseball bat was so tight, my knuckles ached. The dot on the screen was now at the edge of my patio. My phone buzzed. "Almost there. Can't wait to finally meet you." I typed back with trembling fingers. "Where are you right now?" 3 dots appeared immediately. She was typing. "Just turned onto your street. Look out your window." I looked at my front window. Still empty. I looked at the app. The dot was now directly outside my sliding glass door. Something tapped against the glass. I don't know how I didn't scream. Everything in me wanted Wanted to yell, wanted to run, wanted to do anything except stand there frozen in place. But I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. I just stood there with my bat raised and my eyes locked on those blinds. Another tap. Lighter this time, like fingernails tracing down the glass. Then, silence. I forced myself to move. Not toward the door, toward my bedroom. I grabbed my keys, my wallet, my phone. I didn't take anything else. I went out my front door as quietly as I could, locked it behind me, and walked to my car with the kind of forced calm that comes from pure adrenaline. I didn't look back at my house. I got in my car, started the engine, and drove. I don't even know where I was planning to go. I just knew I needed to not be there. I ended up at a 24-hour diner about 15 minutes away, parked under a streetlight, and sat in my car trying to get my hands to stop shaking. My phone buzzed. A text from Alara. "Hey, just got to your place. Knocked, but no answer. You inside?" I stared at the message. According to the app, she was now at my front door. The same door I'd locked behind me less than 10 minutes ago. I typed back, "Who was in my backyard?" 3 dots, then nothing. The dots disappeared. A minute passed. 2 minutes. 3. Then, "What are you talking about?" The app shows your location. It showed you in my backyard while you were texting me about traffic. Someone was behind my house. Another long pause. Then, "The app must be glitching. I just got here. My Uber driver can confirm. I was never in your backyard." Someone was. I called the police from the diner parking lot, told them I believed someone had been on my property, that I'd left because I felt unsafe. They sent 2 officers to check things out. 45 minutes later, I got a call back. The officers had done a full sweep of my property. The backyard, the garage, every door and window. They didn't find anyone. No signs of forced entry. No evidence that anyone had been there at all. But when I got home later that night, accompanied by the officers, who were kind enough to escort me, I noticed something that made my stomach drop. The small garden lantern I kept near my back porch was lying on its side, knocked over. The ground around it was soft from recent rain, and in that soft dirt, there were footprints. Someone had been standing there, right where the dot said they'd be. I never heard from Alara again. Her profile disappeared from the app the next day. The number she'd been texting from went straight to a disconnected tone. I tried reverse searching her photos, running her name through every database I could find. Nothing. Like she'd never existed. I don't know if Alara was a real person whose account got hacked. I don't know if the whole thing was a setup from the beginning. I don't know who was in my backyard that night, or why they were there, or what would have happened if I'd opened that sliding door. All I know is that the app wasn't glitching. Someone was already here, and they wanted me to think they weren't. I moved out of that townhouse 3 months later, changed my phone number, deleted every dating app I'd ever downloaded, and haven't reinstalled any of them since. Before I tell you this story, you need to understand something about me. I grew up in a rough neighborhood. Not the worst, but bad enough that I learned to read situations fast, to spot when something was off before it went sideways. That instinct saved my life more than once as a kid. I thought I'd gotten soft after moving to the suburbs for college. Thought maybe those old survival reflexes had dulled. But after what happened with Zane, I learned they were still there. They just needed the right trigger. I'd been using dating apps on and off for about a year when I matched with him. Zane was 26, same age as me at the time, and his profile was the kind of effortlessly cool that made you wonder if it was curated by a professional. Musician photos, candid shots at farmers markets, a golden retriever wearing a bandana. His bio was short and punchy. "Life's too short for boring people. Let's make some bad decisions." We matched on a Friday night. and by Monday, we'd been texting almost non-stop. Zane was funny, self-deprecating, and had this way of making even mundane topics feel interesting. When I mentioned I was into vintage horror movies, he immediately started recommending obscure Italian films I'd never heard of. When I talked about my job in restaurant management, he asked genuine questions about the industry, instead of just nodding along. It felt like we clicked. After about 2 weeks of texting, Zane invited me to come over for a movie night at his place. He said he'd just moved into a new house and wanted to show it off. We could order pizza, watch something classic, keep things casual. I hesitated. Going to someone's house before meeting them in public was a risk. I knew that. But Zane had been so consistent, so open, that I let my guard down. "Sure," I texted back. "What's the address?" Zane's place was about 30 minutes outside the main city, in one of those newer developments, where all the houses looked vaguely the same. Nice area, quiet streets, the kind of neighborhood where families moved to escape the noise of urban life. I pulled up around 8 o'clock, just as the sun was starting to set. His house was at the end of a cul-de-sac, 2 stories, well-maintained lawn, warm light glowing through the front windows. It looked exactly like what you'd expect from a young professional with decent money. I parked on the street and walked up the driveway. The front door was already cracked open, which I thought was a little weird. Before I could knock, I heard Zane's voice from inside. "That you, Kieran? Come on in. Door's open." I pushed the door wider and stepped into the entryway. That's when I saw the shoes. There was a rack near the door, one of those tiered metal things designed to hold maybe 4 or 5 pairs. But this one was overflowing. I counted at least 8 different sets of footwear: men's work boots, white sneakers, black dress shoes, sandals, or running shoes, different sizes, different styles, far too many for one person. A cold finger traced down my spine. "Hello," I called out. "In the living room." Zane's voice came from deeper in the house. "Straight ahead and to the left. I'm just finishing up something in the kitchen." I didn't move. I stood in that entryway and looked at those shoes, and every alarm bell my body had spent 26 years learning to recognize started screaming at once. Too many shoes. Wrong sizes. No women's pairs, so it wasn't a couple living here. And Zane had said he'd just moved in. Who accumulates that many shoes in a few weeks? Something was very, very wrong, and I hadn't even made it past the front door. "You coming?" Zane called again. There was something in his voice now, a slight edge I hadn't heard before. Impatience, maybe, or anticipation. "Yeah," I said, "just admiring your place." I took a slow step forward, keeping my back toward the wall. The entryway opened into a living room on the left and a staircase on the right. The living room was lit by a single-floor lamp in the corner, casting long shadows across what looked like a normal setup. Couch, coffee table, TV mounted on the wall. But there was something off about the arrangement. The couch was positioned with its back to the hallway, which meant anyone sitting there couldn't see who was approaching. The coffee table had 2 drinks already poured, waiting, and the TV was off, even though Zane had said we were watching a movie. I heard something from upstairs, a creak, then another. Not the settling of an old house. This was weight on floorboards, someone shifting their position. "Zane," I said, louder this time. "Is someone else here?" A pause, then his voice, closer now. "What?" "No, man, it's just us. Why would you think that?" He appeared in the kitchen doorway at the far end of the living room. Zane looked exactly like his photos. Handsome, early 20s, easy smile. He was holding 2 plates of pizza. "I thought I heard something upstairs," I said. "Old house," he shrugged. "Makes all kinds of noises. Come sit down. I got everything set up." I didn't sit down. Instead, I walked slowly toward the living room, keeping my eyes on Zane and my peripheral vision on every shadow. As I got closer, I noticed more wrong things. A dining table in the corner had 3 chairs pulled out, even though only 2 were needed. There was a half-empty glass of water on the kitchen counter, different from the 2 drinks on the coffee table. And the kitchen door that led to what looked like a garage or back room was closed, but I could see light spilling out from underneath it. "You know what?" I said, stopping in the middle of the room. "I just realized I left my phone in the car. Let me grab it real quick." Zane's smile flickered. "You sure?" "It can wait." "Nah, I feel weird without it. 2 seconds." I turned toward the front door. That's when I heard the whisper. It came from upstairs, so quiet I almost missed it. A male voice, low and urgent, saying something I couldn't make out. Then another voice responding. I stopped. Zane stopped too. His smile was completely gone now. "Kieran," he said, and his voice was different, harder. "Why don't you just sit down? Who else is in this house?" "No one. I told you, don't." I held up my hand. "Don't lie to me." I heard voices. "I see 8 pairs of shoes by your front door. And you said you just moved in." For a long moment, neither of us moved. The house was suddenly silent. That specific kind of silence that happens when people are trying very hard not to make noise. Then I heard the sound that confirmed everything. A door opening. The one behind me, at the top of the stairs. I didn't wait to see who was coming. I moved on pure instinct. The same instinct that kept me alive in the old neighborhood. I grabbed the floor lamp next to me, ripped its plug from the wall, and threw it at Zane. He dodged, but it gave me the second I needed. I ran for the front door. Behind me, I heard shouting. Multiple voices now. Not just Zane. At least 2 others, maybe 3. All yelling variations of, "Get him!" and "Block the door!" I made it to the entryway just as someone came crashing down the stairs. A guy I'd never seen. Early 30s, heavy build, face twisted with anger. He lunged for me. I slammed my shoulder into him and kept moving. The front door was still cracked open. I burst through it and sprinted down the driveway toward my car. My keys were already in my hand. I'd learned to keep them there. And I had the door open before I even fully stopped running. I jumped in, started the engine, and floored it. In my rearview mirror, I saw 3 figures pour out of the house and stop at the end of the driveway. Zane was one of them, the guy from the stairs. And a third person I couldn't make out clearly. They didn't chase me. They just stood there, watching. I drove until I hit the main highway, then pulled over at the first well-lit gas station I saw. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold my phone, but I managed to call 911 and tell them everything. The police went to the house that night. When they got there, no one was home. The front door was locked. All the lights were off. But when they obtained a warrant and searched the property 2 days later, they found evidence that multiple people had been living there. Mattresses in the upstairs bedrooms, stashes of personal belongings, food for at least 4 or 5 people. And in the garage, they found something that made my blood run cold. Zip ties, duct tape, and a shovel. The investigation went on for months. I gave statements, identified photos, worked with detectives as they tried to track down the people who'd been in that house. Zane's profile was fake. Stolen photos from some guy's Instagram in another state. The phone number he'd used was a burner. The house itself was a short-term rental, paid for in cash. They never caught him. Any of them. The detective who worked my case told me, off the record, that I wasn't the first person to report something like this in the area. There had been at least 2 other incidents in the past year. People lured to properties through dating apps. Properties that turned out to be staged traps. Most of the victims hadn't gotten out. I don't know what would have happened if I'd sat down on that couch like Zane wanted. If I'd ignored the shoes, The whispers, the instincts screaming at me to leave. Maybe they were planning a robbery, maybe something worse. All I know is that those survival instincts I thought I'd lost were still there. And they saved my life. If you ever walk into a house and something feels wrong, even if you can't explain what, trust that feeling. Don't talk yourself out of it. Don't try to be polite. Just leave. Because sometimes the most dangerous thing you can do is ignore the voice in your head telling you to run. And those were 3 true stories from people who learned the hard way that the person behind the screen isn't always who they claim to be. Before I go, here's a quick safety tip. Before you meet anyone from a dating app, do a reverse image search on their photos. It takes 30 seconds and can tell you if those pictures were stolen from someone else's social media. And always, always meet in a public place first. No exceptions. If you made it this far, do me a favor and hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. It's free, and it helps these stories reach more people who need to hear them. And if you have your own dating app horror story you want to share, drop it in the comments. I might feature it in a future video. Stay safe out there. And remember, trust your gut. It's trying to tell you something. I'll see you in the next video.